I can't help but wonder if your tears dripped on the pages of the book as you read the introduction in chapter 1 of Living Unbroken. I've had so many women share that they felt it was as if I was telling their story. This saddens me, but also brings me joy for one reason. This was my prayer in writing Living Unbroken, that women would realize they are not the only ones who feel the way they do or are struggling in the aftermath of a failed marriage. That they are not the only women who can't put a label on their feelings, but know without a shadow of a doubt that their feelings are controlling their life, yet they don't know what to do about it. And some of us feel so ashamed of our feelings, not only because we might feel embarrassed in front of others, because we're struggling so much and we can't seem to keep it together, and because there's just no way for them to possibly understand. But also we might feel embarrassed in front of God too, hesitant to share our true feelings with Him and feeling like we're letting Him down as a Christian. After all, if we're a good Christian girl, we should be able to trust God and not worry and fret all the time, right? We should be able to get over the heartbreak and find a peace that surpasses all understanding, right? Shouldn't we just keep on the "no, I'm fine" mask and appear strong because God is our strength? You know, for believers, I guess the official answer is yes, but the reality is that we're only human. And on top of that, we're female humans who have compassionate, loving, fragile hearts. It's our nature to struggle with hard emotions, especially when we feel broken beyond repair, betrayed, damaged, afraid, and when our life just seems to be in shambles and a sense of hopelessness has overtaken our mind. There's a short passage in the Bible which reminds us that even if we feel we have to hide our true feelings and struggles from others, we don't have to try to put on an act for God. Even if we feel like we have to stay strong for the sake of children, friends, and family, or if we're just trying to keep up the facade that we're not falling apart or feeling like we're turning into some crazy person, God still knows the real us. We don't have to be afraid to let Him know how we're feeling, or even if we're angry at Him, because the truth is, He already knows, and He can take it. Psalm 139, 1-4 says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." Now listen to this translation from the Message Bible, which tends to put verses in a new perspective that we can personally relate to sometimes better in today's world. Psalm 139, 1-6 from the Message says, "God, investigate my life. Get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you. Even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. You know when I leave and when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. You know everything I'm going to say before I start the first sentence." You see, we can be real with God. This journey we are on is hard, and God knows it's hard and painful, which is why He said in Malachi 2:16, "For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel." But never forget that He says He hated divorce. He did not say He hated the people who get divorced. He does not hate you. He does not hate me simply because of our marital status. He loves us despite our marital status and regardless of why a divorce happened. We see the rest of that verse in Malachi go on to say, to divorce your wife is to overwhelm her with cruelty. You see, He knew how heartbreaking and painful divorce is, which is why He clearly explained His reasons for esteeming marriage so highly. In the verse prior, in Malachi 2:15, He said, "He who made them one." Marriage was God's idea, and He hates when a covenant is broken and deviates from His plan for marriage. But again, He does not hate the person going through it. Instead, as I mentioned last week, regardless of the cause of our pain, He is close to the brokenhearted and wants to mend their wounds, not turn His back on the hurting. So knowing that, we can feel confident in the fact that we don't need to act religious and try to hide our pain, worry, anxiety, frustration, sadness, or even our anger from God. We don't need to assume that just because we're Christians, we're not allowed to have feelings or show emotion or be transparent or vulnerable. Feelings and emotions are normal and they are necessary. But if we're not careful, our feelings can begin controlling our life and our happiness. They can prevent us from truly healing and trusting God actually does have good plans for us. When we constantly allow ourselves to think hopeless thoughts, negativity, anger, or worry, our negative, pessimistic thoughts will continually dictate our feelings, which ultimately control how we live our lives. I want to share something with you that I learned many months into my separation and divorce journey. Your feelings are not the boss of you, but you have to make a decision to stand up and decide to be the boss of them instead. For me, I finally made that decision when I realized that I was fed up with feeling sad and hopeless and emotionally exhausted. I was tired of assuming that the future couldn't be bright simply because the present was difficult. I knew I needed to be a role model for my children and that my attitude would permeate theirs, either positively or negatively. I also knew that I needed to put my hope in God, trusting that not only was He able to heal broken hearts, but that no matter what, I could have peace and joy in my heart if I intentionally invited Him to help me with my thoughts first. I didn't want to spend my life being bitter and negative and stuck in pessimism, regardless of my circumstances. And I certainly didn't want to be the kind of person who always sees the glass half empty instead of half full. That person who inadvertently overlooks all of her blessings because of the negative or bitter blinders on her heart. I'd never been that type of person before, and in a moment with the one who holds all hope, I became determined I never was going to be. That day I got on my knees and had a long conversation with Jesus, full of honest questions, anger, pleas, and tears. And then I sensed His voice whispering a gentle question to my spiritual ears, and it immediately caught me off guard. My answer caught me off guard as well. He said, "Will you still love me, Tracie?" And my answer, without hesitating, even through tears, was, "I still love you, Lord." And I'm not going to lie, I kind of surprised myself with my response because I had been struggling with being a little angry at God for allowing this to happen and for not protecting my marriage, for which I had prayed hundreds of prayers that seemed to go completely unanswered. But hearing my own heartfelt words, "I still love you, Lord," that just brought comfort to my soul. I realized I truly did still love Jesus, despite what He allowed in my life. And it gave me this renewed sense of hope, not only in Him and my future, but in myself too. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I grabbed hold of that hope, the peace, and the reassurance that He was offering and committed to holding on as tightly as I could. As His peace just washed over me in that moment, I came to understand that even though things hadn't turned out the way I wanted them to, and life was seriously a struggle in every way, living a life of joy and positive thinking was still within my reach. And the first step of that journey had to be taken in my own head. I had no control over my circumstances or the actions or decisions of my ex-husband, but I could take control over my thoughts about them. I knew that I needed to begin shifting my thoughts so my negative thoughts and overwhelming emotions didn't control my life. I wanted to be the boss over my own life. And friend, you can do the same. When we surrender that negativity and we commit to trust God through this storm, optimism and positive thinking are possible for every single one of us. We have the power within us through Christ to choose to be positive and believe that even if our circumstances stay the same, our heart and our mind will not. Friend, I know what it's like to feel justified in living with a negative mindset and wallowing in self-pity and sadness and hopelessness. I get it. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning in all the stages of grief that you read about in chapter 1. I know what it's like to be upset with the situations God has either caused or allowed in our life, and maybe even feel a little angry at Him, and to so desperately want situations to be different, yet feel powerless to change them. And I know what it's like to long to be happy again, and to break free from the shackles of pain and heartache and disappointment that keep pulling down our spirits every day. But you know what I also know? I know what it's like to experience freedom from all those emotions, relief from grief and heartbreak and regret, and overcome exhausting patterns of thinking. And I want you to experience that too. Now, trust me, I know what you might be thinking to yourself right now. Well, good for you, Tracie. I can't possibly do that because of, and then you can fill in the blank with your own experience or excuse. But I'm here to tell you that if I can do it, then so can you. And countless women have done the same before you. When our thoughts start going down rabbit trails that cause us depression, anxiety, hopelessness, I realize it takes a lot of willpower and faith and a lot of asking God to step in to overcome that pull of negative thinking. Even though our problems and our worries completely justify us struggling with those pessimistic thoughts and emotions, it's not healthy emotionally or physically for us to stay stuck in those thinking ruts. But doesn't knowing that when our thoughts and attitudes get better, our lives can too, even if our circumstances remain the same, make you feel just a little giddy inside at the thought of that happening to you? We can't always control how we feel, but we can always take authority over our own minds and change the way we think, which changes the way we view and experience life overall. Our feelings do not have to boss us around anymore. You see, when we learn to change the way we think, we can change the way we feel, which gradually transforms our minds to be more like Christ, which in turn changes the way we live, making living our life a more positive experience overall. And isn't that what we all want? Just because something bad happens in our life doesn't mean our entire life is bad. And just because we're unhappy in the moment or with the current situation doesn't mean we are doomed to live an unhappy life. A changed mind will always result in a changed heart. There are countless thoughts and fears and feelings that we all struggle with, so I want to close with a few ideas to help you start thinking differently about some of the most common ones, which gradually lead to feeling differently and eventually lead to living differently as well. First, in the early stages of my divorce, it seemed like every time things started to get a little better, something new would happen to set me back. To use an old analogy, I was always waiting for that other shoe to drop, and that's not a fun way to live. Rather than getting pulled into that mindset or stuck in it, if you have caught yourself thinking that way, try to remember this. Commitment, hard work, dedication, and consistency will ultimately always move us forward and make any setback, which will most likely happen, seem so much more manageable. We can't control other people or circumstances. We have no way of knowing what new problems might be in store for us, but we can always control how we think and the decisions we make about how we want to live our lives. We can choose to focus on just doing the best we can and recognize that worrying about what we can't control or predict is not going to help anything. Secondly, as you've read in the book, it took me a while to realize that I was so afraid of the unknowns, that I was consumed with not only what might happen in the near and distant future, but also scared to death of the situations which were already happening that I was trying to deal with. And fear was suffocating any level of peace or sanity that I tried to find. I want to encourage you today to recognize that fear is normal. In fact, it would be abnormal if we weren't afraid of uncertainties and what the future holds. But also, I want to encourage you to remember this. Fear is also manageable. When we ask for God's peace to replace it, it becomes manageable. We can either allow fear to drive us, motivate us, and energize us to move forward with God's peace in our hearts, or we can constantly beat ourselves up for feeling afraid. Fear is normal, but so is God's peace if we let it rule us instead of fear. Thirdly, I know it's hard to be single, especially if you never wanted to be in the first place. And I know the inner ache of crushing loneliness. But as time went by in my own divorce journey, I began to try to retrain my thoughts to look for the positives in every situation. Yes, I was divorced. It wasn't what I wanted. But wasn't that better than being in a bad, loveless, or abusive marriage? Yes, I felt alone at times. But I would think back to all those times when I felt more alone when my husband was still at home than when he wasn't, and try to make the best of the alone time I had. Yes, I was having extreme financial distress. But that didn't mean I couldn't wake up each day and commit to trusting God's promises of provision and ask for peace even when things looked bleak. Yes, I was a single mom, and it was so hard trying to be mom and dad. But being single didn't mean I couldn't be the mom I wanted to be, and the mom I knew God called me to be when He placed my children in my life. Yes, I had every right to be angry and mad and vengeful, but all that was doing was stealing my own joy. You see, every negative thought about any situation can be turned around if we choose to make it a priority and form a habit of doing it. Last, but certainly not least, and this is not a comprehensive list of ideas by any means, but I want to encourage you to stay physically active in some way. I confess I spent many months, way too many, curled up on the couch and wrapped in layers of emotions, depression, and sadness. We all go through those spells, maybe more than once. But the value of just moving our bodies, even when we don't feel like getting out of bed, is immeasurable. Whether it's serious exercise or just committing to take a slow walk around the block every day, physical movement helps our emotional state more than you would think. It energizes us and helps us feel stronger, even on those days when we feel the weakest. Managing all the emotional and mental complexities of separation and divorce, single parenting, co-parenting, it all really boils down to one central word, and that word is choice. The key in dealing with divorce and the anxiety and emotions that come with it is making an intentional choice and a personal commitment to focus on the positives as much as you can. It's the first step in this difficult journey, but it paves the way to shaping a brighter and better future for ourselves. From this point forward, I want you to fully believe that you have the power to determine how you will think, feel, and live every single day. You have it in you to still love your Jesus with all your heart, even if your heart is broken. And your circumstances may be difficult, but you don't have to live as a broken woman. The choice to be happy and live happy, fully whole and alive, despite our circumstances, that's up to us. I'll end with this verse as a sweet reminder of why we can choose to move forward with peace, optimism, and a strength we may not even know that we have. It's in Hebrews 6:19. This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. As you progress through this next week, anchor your hope in God. When you feel like you're sinking, remember that He's your life raft, able to keep you afloat. When your thoughts are sinking, yell out for rescue. God can fill you with hope. He can handle all your problems. He can lessen your fears. He'll hold your heart while you grieve and walk right beside you into the beautiful future He has laid out just for you. And just remember that He not only can, but He will.